one approach, which some folks take, is create everything, take 18 months to create a course, right? Invest a ton of time and go out there, and then you find out it flops. And like, that's heartbreaking. So like, don't do that. What we did is we're like, all right, what do we need for our sales page, right? To see if there's interest. And so we put that out there, we promoted that, and we found that people, in fact, were quite interested. And in fact, signed up for and registered for our course at an upcoming date. Now, we had not created the course material. We just created enough to test market the idea. And what we got was validation, not just people nodding their heads and saying yes, but people taking out a credit card and actually providing funds up front. You have tiers, and those can keep going. And so you look at what it is you can offer the upper echelon of customers, right, who need a higher level of service. What you can offer is a downsell to the customers who don't yet qualify for your primary service, and so on. And therein lies the expansion of your business lines when you're selling online. And that's one of the ways that we've seen many of our online members grow again and again and again, is simply by rinsing and repeating. If you don't have the list, where do you get the audience to sell to? Well, that's just one leg of the stool, right? And there are many approaches to that.
If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now let's get to it with today's guest. Welcome, Digital Trailblazers. With us today is Jeremy Shapiro. Jeremy, go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Shapiro. I've been a serial entrepreneur my entire career, which, as my gray will prove, has been a few decades. All of my businesses over the years have been in the service of fellow business owners and entrepreneurs as well, and helping them to move towards entrepreneurial freedom. The latest incarnation of that for the past, well over 10 years now, has been our Bay Area Mastermind, where we help like-minded business owners and entrepreneurs get together, connect, and grow their businesses.
So how did this form, this mastermind? Where did this come from?
I've been a member of mastermind groups for 20 plus years. And these have ranged from the high-end destination groups where you're, writing new car money-sized checks, every year to be part of these groups, all the way down to sort of these smaller accountability groups and everything in between. And what I found is sort of between those two ends of the spectrum, there was the sweet spot of a mastermind meeting format where you get together once a day to work on the business instead of the day-to-day time that most of us spend working in the business. And creating that space really let us leverage, what Napoleon Hill called the mastermind, the collection of 2 or more minds together in one room, and you get the benefit of that collective knowledge that everyone has that helps to uncover blind spots, see opportunities, and so on. So those were always really valuable to me from a participant standpoint, and that really blossomed and helped us to grow to the point where we could start facilitating groups, not as a guru-led mastermind where everyone's there because you are the expert, they want to be around you, but really facilitating these peer advisory groups where members get to connect and help each other to grow.
We know you're doing the mastermind now. You said that you've been in entrepreneurship forever. So what is your entrepreneurial journey? What does that look like?
Oh my gosh. So back in high school, I'd actually started my first businesses, first real businesses, and was fortunate to be able to run and build some of those up even, while going through high school. And as I got into college, my businesses continued to build. And I got to this interesting inflection point where I had to make a decision I didn't actually think I wanted to be a part of, but was sort of forced into. And that was this. I was both attending university full-time, and also my business was at the point where even with a team, I was still putting in 40 hours a week. And I had to make a choice. I was seeing a bump in business, and I thought, you know what? This is a little temporary bump. I'll take some time off, and then I'll come back to school once I sort of get that running on its own. And my wife, who I met a short time after that, took one look at me when I shared with her that same story of like, I'll be going back to school next semester. And even then she was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. She knew it then. And, she's still not wrong. I haven't been back. And so, that first business really sort of rolled into the next one, the next one, the next one. And what I've seen, not just in myself and, sort of my serial entrepreneurship journey, but also in our members and clients as well, is that serial entrepreneurship comes from seeing opportunities within your own business and seeing opportunities in the marketplace to fill a need. And that's one of the cool things us entrepreneurs have, is not just that vision of where there's a problem or a deficiency, but also the wherewithal to realize that we can fix that. But most importantly is then that belief and that execution of being able to actually do it and doing it. So that typically leads to that mindset of seeing opportunities in your own business or the marketplace and filling that again and again and again. And therein lies serial entrepreneurship.
I want to learn more about kind of the 50,000 level view that you've been able to have in the online space with what you're doing in masterminds, because I think that's a unique conversation that most of us never get that viewpoint, right? Yeah. We hear it's whoever's Facebook ads get shown to us. It's whose personality interests us. We start watching their content online. We're getting these little micro views of the industry, and you have like this 50,000 foot view of everything. So that's what I really want to dive into deep today, and kind of you've been here for a long time. And even us, we've been here 8 years, I believe now. And in internet space, that's a long time on the online, right? But there's been a lot of shift constantly, obviously, in this space. That's what's the one consistent in the internet, is that it's always changing. So give us some insights. What are you seeing? Like, what was working? What is working? What's happening?
Yeah, one of the cool things that I love seeing within the mastermind groups is what I call the cross-pollination of ideas. And we've all got our industry, our niche space where we can go to our trade shows and our groups and meet more people like us who do the same things that we do in the same ways and get the same results, right? Well, with a mastermind group that is not like an industry thing, but actually has those conversations across the table, some really valuable pivots and shifts happen. And so I'll give you an example of this. You have an e-commerce business owner sitting across the table from like a brick and mortar retail, right? Both are seeing success in their business in their own ways with their own channels, their own processes, and they're both successful. Well, as the conversations are coming up and business owners are sharing what's working, you get that cross-pollination. So the e-commerce business owner hears from the brick and mortar retail store how they're using direct mail to grow their business. Now, this is a business that's grown to be an 8-figure business using all the things you guys talk about, the PPC, the SEO, the FBA, everything, right? They're doing great, but they've not been using direct mail. So now this e-commerce business owner gets to start asking those questions to that brick and mortar business about, where do you buy your lists and what do you send out? Is it a postcard? Is it a letter? Is it color? Is it black and white? Like, tell me. And this business owner is happy to share what's been working well for them and introduce them to, here's my list broker, here's my print fulfillment house, here's my this and that. And so over the next month between those two meetings, that online business for the first time starts like sending out paper through the mail with stamps on it, right? Like the old days, and opens up a whole new channel of business with customers who'd never even heard of this business before, right? So suddenly the e-commerce business is going from people who are problem and solution aware to a whole new market that had never heard of them, who might not even be yet problem aware, and is increasing their business that way. And on the flip side, of course, this retail business owner is hearing about all this email marketing, is able to start doing that for their business, even though they were just a physical in-person business. So that's just an example, and I have a ton more along those lines of at the 50,000 foot view where businesses are exchanging how they're building out their channels with each other. Businesses add new channels on. We had a doctor, right, who had a traditional medical practice, was then able to add on an online e-commerce component to the business where customers could shop and buy things online, and then was able to add a continuity piece to the business and a membership program, right? So for our online folks, we know all about continuity programs and online courses and e-commerce and all that. But when you take one business that's successful in its own right and you add on new revenue streams and you add on new channels and you add on new pools of customers, that's where you really get powerful growth in your business.
So a lot of our audience, the vast majority, I would say, are digital course creators, coaches, kind of in that space.
Yeah.
So what would you say have you seen working well with, lead gen or sales processes and conversions and all of that?
Yeah. So for our experts and authors out there, right, who have written a book or working on a book and so on, right, you're used to providing a service that's built around you, right? So when you look at how you scale that business up and get towards that entrepreneurial freedom, right, we've got to look at what systems and people do we put in place so the business is less reliant upon just you. And sometimes that comes from working up that ladder of ascension for your customers, right? So they come to you for your service, but the question is, what's next? What else do they need? And how do you add on those additional channels beyond that, right? So typically the one many of us are familiar with is, an expert who's providing services. At some point, you just keep increasing your fees and the business keeps growing, but you still tap out in your hours. So then you go out there and publish your book, you create your course, and you leverage your expertise in new ways, right? Mm-hmm. My question would be like, what's the continuity component? Do you have a recurring revenue piece for all of those people who are coming to you? And then what's your higher value and how do you increase that? There was a gentleman I was in a mastermind with. He was in the financial planning space. So he is an expert service provider. His clients are coming to him for wealth management advice. So he was putting together, he wanted to do like a live event for his customers, right? Now think about that. How many folks in financial planning are happy just to, collect their fees from their advisory work and the portfolios of their clients and call that a business? Well, this guy wanted to do more. So he went out there and he wanted to do a live event for all of his clients. You could think of this like customer appreciation event, whatever you want to call it. And what he found out is people wanted to go somewhere cool. And that turned out to be the idea of let's get together and do a cruise. So he organized a cruise for his clients. And he was asking like, hey, what speakers should we have on our speaker lineup? What should the agenda be? What guest expert topics do you want to know about? And what he found out was that his clients wanted to just hang out with people who were like him, who were like themselves, right? And so it was less about what's the speaker lineup and more around, thank you for getting me together with people who get me. And so he had a wonderful cruise, very successful. And you talk about loyal clients. Is anyone going to change to a different advisor when you have that kind of connection, right? So really great on the relationship side and a whole new revenue stream, of course, as well. Well, afterwards, he did what many of us do in our business. And if you're not, you should send out the follow-up survey to check in and see where can we improve. And what he heard back was many of his clients, I believe at the time it was they needed $1 million net worth and higher. Mm-hmm. And many of his clients got back and said like, hey, look, this was good, but we want to hang out with more people like us, with the $5 million net worth and up. So like, not the riffraff. So he's like, okay, next year I'll do like a separate cruise for our higher net worth individuals. And so he does that, higher price point. Everyone has a great time. No one wants a speaker lineup. They just want to hang out with people like them, like a country club model. Does the same thing, does a survey. And again, people are like, this is nice, but like the people with a $25 million net worth and up like us, we want to be with people more like ourselves. So what he found was there were sort of these tiers of clients, a segmentation that his clients were self-identifying. And there were different offerings at different price points that his clients wanted. So for our listeners who have online businesses and are selling a thing, keep in mind, there are segments within your audience that want to be served in different ways. A classic breakdown of this is there are clients who want to just buy a book. And even if they never open it, they feel good about buying your book. Not a high ticket sale. You're not going to make a lot of money on it, but they feel good and it's the start of a relationship. Others are going to want the course, maybe at a few $1,000 to find out from you how to do the thing that you do. And yet you have a whole other tier at a much higher level who don't have the time to implement all of your wisdom and knowledge. They just want it done for them. And so they'll be at a done for you tier. So even just on that classic example, which exists within your own audience, you have tiers and those can keep going. And so you look at what it is you can offer the upper echelon of customers, right, who need a higher level of service. What you can offer is a downsell to the customers who don't yet qualify for your primary service, and so on. And therein lies the expansion of your business lines when you're selling online. And that's one of the ways that we've seen many of our online members grow again and again and again is simply by rinsing and repeating that.
So quick question about that, all those different offerings, because there's a large portion of our audience that they're maybe working on their very first offering, or they're considering something, or maybe they've already created it, but it's not going so well. Where would you suggest people start, like in that continuum? Because I know there's a lot of people that think that they just want to start with something cheap and easy that they can sell and hopefully make some profit on. There's other people that jump straight into high ticket and they're going with the done for you offer for a premium price. Do you find that there's a price range or a specific type of offer that works best for somebody just getting started?
That's a really good question too, in terms of how to approach that. Because one of the things that we talk about again and again is MVP. Like, figure out what your minimum viable product is, get it out there, and let it start producing, and then build on that. So I'll share with you an example. In one of our previous businesses, every business I've launched, they've all been bootstrapped. They've all been cash flow positive from day one. None has ever taken on debt to launch or investors or anything like that, right? So you can start your business and get paying customers before you've invested a whole lot of time or money. Okay? So one of these businesses, we had the idea for a course we wanted to offer. But, one approach which some folks take is create everything, take 18 months to create a course, right? Invest a ton of time and go out there and then you find out it flops. And that's heartbreaking. So don't do that. What we did is we're like, all right, what do we need for our sales page, right? To see if there's interest. And so we put that out there, we promoted that, and we found that people, in fact, were quite interested. And in fact, signed up for and registered for our course at an upcoming date. Now, we had not created the course material. We just created enough to test market the idea. And what we got was validation, not just people nodding their heads and saying yes, but people taking out a credit card and actually providing funds up front. That was fantastic. So now we had cash flow coming in, we had a date on the calendar, and we had a time window. This is important, time boxed in to actually create the product. So now it's ready. So we now had funds up front, created our product, our course, and ran the course the day of. We were able to pay for the event, pay for the videographer, pay for the AV and all that stuff from the money that came in up front. We're recording it the day of, and we tested out something new, is we asked folks in the room, hey, we're going to be recording this. If you want a copy of this so you can rewatch the course later on your own time and go over the stuff, etc., just sign up on this form right here and you can buy the digital version of this course also. And there was interest for that as well. So even the day of, we effectively had an upsell in place. That revenue now justified, okay, let's go get this thing edited. So we got the whole course edited and chopped up and organized to be a great online course and had the funds to cover a vendor doing that. So we moved one step further forward in that MVP. We then went to sell that online. And we did our first affiliate webinar to promote this course. And man, not everything is a win, right?
Yeah.
So we got onto the webinar and now it's a whole new audience, new presentation, everything. And we get out there and run this webinar and we goose egged. Zero. We had zero sales. And this was leveraging a relationship, somebody who had a list that was willing to put us in front of it. They could have put somebody else in that spot. They could have made money a different way, but they went out on the line, put their neck out for us. And oh man, that hurt. So, what do, right? You can pack up and go home or you iterate. So we went out and, we first of all debriefed and apologized and asked the host who'd seen other webinars, where did we go wrong here? This was a new market for us, a new channel. What could we have done differently? So he had really valuable insight because he had that perspective of having had other folks who crushed it and did great, right? So we got pointers. We brought on someone else to help us out. We also still had other webinars booked. So we took the revised presentation, ran that on our next call, and did okay, right? Didn't knock it out of the park, but did okay. But we iterated and we continued to improve and dial in, and that presentation got better over time and got better results and closed higher and ended up getting used in, a large audience with thousands of people and brought in millions and millions and millions in revenue from a continuously iterated and tested presentation, right? And we learned a ton more in that process as well in terms of pricing and what to sell and how, but all of that was baby step MVP each step of the way. Wasn't approaching backwards and building the perfect thing with a lot of time and money and hoping it sells, but testing each little incremental step. So for our listeners who are just getting started and want to try something out, what is the quickest path to cash where you can test out an idea and get a sale and then go fulfill on that? And if it doesn't sell, iterate and try again in a different way.
Gotcha. Yeah. So a couple of questions on that very first offer. Number one would be, how do you get the traffic? So once you create the offer, where does the traffic come from? Because I know a lot of people, because when we started, we had no audience. We had no online influence. We didn't even have Instagram. We didn't have a Twitter account. We just had personal Facebook accounts that we rarely used. So we were starting from scratch. We had no email list. We didn't know anybody. We had no influence. If you're starting in that situation, and you create that minimum, that MVP product, where do you get the traffic from that? Do you go to paid ads? Do you try to find somebody, find somebody else's list that they're willing to promote for you, or what do you do?
Yeah. So I found in any successful business, there's sort of 3 legs to the stool, and you don't need all 3. But if you're missing one, you're going to be going somewhere else for it, and that might be okay. But the more of those legs you have, the better, right? And those are, you need something to sell. That's mostly what we're talking about here, is creating that thing to sell, right? You need an audience to sell it to, and then you need a way to sell that thing to that audience, right? So breaking that down, the first one's obvious. You have a course, a product, a book, or something that you want to sell. Maybe, right? The who to sell it to is typically in the form of a list or an online audience or using ads to go out there and get it. And the how to sell is the piece some folks don't think about or realize too late. And that is how to connect those two, right? So that might be a copywriter, right? Someone who knows how to write sales pages, right? All these things that help to sell your thing to that list. Now, I had a client who I did some great work with for a really long time that didn't really have much on the product side. And yet he was a multi-million-dollar business built purely around having a list and being really good at selling things. The challenge there, because they're missing that third leg of the thing to sell, is there was a constant hamster wheel, we called it, of having to go out and find affiliates with things that would resonate to sell to the list.
Right.
Because as soon as that sale was over, you got to go find new stuff. You got to keep that beast fed, right? Until they started creating products of their own that could be sold elsewhere as well and bringing on recurring revenue and all the stuff we're talking about earlier. So you can do it with just those 2. You have other folks who just build up a list, but then hire out a copywriter and, bring in affiliate offers. What many of us are talking about here is creating our thing to sell. But to your question, Todd, if you don't have the list, where do you get the audience to sell to?
Right.
Well, that's just one leg of the stool, right? And there are many approaches to that. So one is, you can go get ads, right? You're going to invest a fair amount in, running ads and trying to find what messaging, what marketing, what media, all those things, those M's that resonate to get folks then in and buying, right? Ideally, you have what we call your house list, right? You've built up some audience somewhere over time. And I've been fortunate that most all of my businesses have branched off from an existing business. And so there's an existing, quote, house list to leverage and work with. But that's not always been the case. In the case of one of our software companies, that was actually launched from a conversation in a mastermind room, right? So there was an idea to fill a need within one of my businesses. And from talking to other folks in the room, they validated the idea. Keep in mind, I was on a break between sessions, jotting something down on a small notepad, right? And then coming back in the room and sort of asking about this idea and folks saying, hey, Jeremy, I love that. I want that for my business too. And within a matter of minutes, just by being in a room with people, right, I had validation of the idea at a low level. And those were also the initial folks who were saying, yes, we'll be the beta customers for this. Please, we want this. And those customers, the day we launched, were paying customers from day one. So there was recurring revenue in place the day we officially launched, right? In another case, for my first e-commerce business, this was over 20 years ago. So think about e-commerce 20 plus years ago. Just go back in your Wayback Machine. There was no Shopify, right? There was no just you instantly have a shopping cart. Credit card processors wasn't really a thing. It was a totally different, ball of wax back then. But that business idea came up on a Friday afternoon. I remember talking to a mentor of mine and a coach of mine, And I was in a wonderful position to have a number of opportunities in front of me. And I was saying, like, I'm like, Tom, how do I choose what to pursue? Like, I need to put time into one of these. How do I choose? And so he gave me a really great framework to figure that out. And that weekend, I put some time into that e-commerce business idea. And on Monday morning, even though there was no list, there was no corporate entity, there was no bank account, there was no credit card processing, there wasn't a secure certificate. Like, that wasn't really a big thing back then. Like, none of that was in place. It was barely a landing page. I still to this day don't know how, but people were finding us and starting to sign up. Wow. And then they were reaching out saying, hey, when can we get access to the stuff we're signed up for? And we're like, we're building it. Like, how'd you even find us, right? And so thankfully, like, they were ready to go. We went and had the attorneys get the corporate paperwork put together and filed so we could then apply for the EIN. That let us go open the bank account, get the merchant account, and start putting all those ducks in a row, and then go out to those customers and saying, hey, okay, now you can actually sign up and pay. And they did. And so by the time 30 days, net 30, we got the invoice from the law firm, there was already money in the account to pay them and so on. So, SEO is great. Affiliates are fantastic. Both of those are quote, free, as it were. Having a house list of your own that you've built up from other businesses or other ways is wonderful as well. If you go with a content first approach, that allows you to lead with your best stuff, like we're doing now, and share this out there and build up a list and a following that way as well. Then you have an audience you can go back to and, begin rolling out your offers to, because they know who you are.
Yeah, I really like that idea of building the audience first. And actually, that's one of the things that we teach our clients is as soon as you know who your audience is going to be, you don't even need to know exactly what the product is, but start building that list, right? Put a lead magnet together, get an opt-in page, get them on a list, create a Facebook group for them, engage with them, start building that audience so that when your product is ready to go, you at least have something that you can launch to.
And that audience you're talking about there, Todd, is so valuable, especially that early on, because as you're thinking about what your product is, like, I love serving our customers and our list on stuff, because sometimes the thing I think is brilliant and mind-blowing and amazing is like their lowest priority. And the thing I think is sort of hum-ho is what they're telling me, like, we want that. So simply by being able to ask, you get that direction that takes you out of being your own customer, which rarely are you your own customer, right? And lets you hear from your customers what they want, what's going to add value. And here's like a really good little nugget. You hear about it from them in their own words.
Right.
Those words you hear from your customer describing the challenge, describing the need, that's what you use in your ads. That's what you use in your marketing, in your product names, right? In everything you do, in your SEO and your PPC. Those are the words your customers are using. That's how you'll connect with your future customers who you don't know yet.
Yeah, that's absolutely, because the way that we put it, that like everybody's like, there's so many, branding experts and business experts out there. And the first thing they always tell you is, oh, you need to know your audience. And so many of them just teach a surface level type of, know your audience. So, their demographics, that, for example, oh, they're women, they're moms, they're, middle-aged, and they like this TV show, and they know these things about them. But in order to really do good copy and to convert sales, you don't just need to know about them. You need to speak their language, right? You need to speak their language. It's like the analogy we often use is if you're marketing to Martians, right? And you know that, okay, they're little green men, they fly in spaceships, you know these things about them. That's not going to help you to sell to them unless you can speak Martian, right? You need to learn how to speak Martian in order to sell to them. And that's the same thing with your audience.
And you keeping those Martians up at night, right? Yeah. They're concerned. Where do they hang out? Right? There's we all know about demographics, but much fewer people know about psychographics.
Right.
And the psychographic is so powerful. Once you dial that in for your list, it is eye-opening. For one of our businesses, we did a psychographic analysis of two important lists. One of our customers and the other of our list, our prospects, right? And what was fascinating was to see the gaps and the differences between who is represented in the list versus the customer base. So we could tell, we know population of our audience, and then we can see overrepresentation and underrepresentation of these categories within our list. And so that's where you find out who is the audience we're attracting, but they don't buy, versus who buys way more and is overrepresented on our list on our customers, but we're doing a poor job attracting. And then you get to actively disqualify the dead weight on your list that will never be a buyer, but they keep ending up there, and better attract the ones you know will outbuy every other psychographic profile. And those profiles do tell you all those things like you're talking about to really dial into better speak Martian.
I love that. So what would be a suggestion on how to get that psychographic information on your list?
Yeah, there's providers that do this. Basically, you provide them the list, they run the analysis, and they report back to you on that. The company we used for that was Crystallytics. Ben does a great job of, you can nerd out super deep on the spreadsheets of that stuff. But that's where you get those takeaways. And that, each one of those psychographic profiles is an entire sheet telling you like what their worries are, what their concerns are, what the aspirations are, what the publications are that they subscribe to, all these different things. So if you then want to do advertising, you can dial into those profiles and hang out where they hang out. There's a magazine called the Robb Report, ROBB. If you look at like their sell sheet for advertisers, like it's a fascinating demographic profile, right? Their demographic profile says things like, average number of houses, average number of boats and airplanes and things like that, their list owns. It's a rather affluent, high-end list. Well, wouldn't you know it, just by subscribing to that magazine, the mail you get and the marketing that suddenly starts showing up in your life from companies who want to talk to that audience is fascinating. Because if you're doing any kind of luxury marketing or high-end, working with high-end clients, that is a space that speaks that language. And so the marketing you start getting, first of all, is lots of really cool offers and invitations to things you otherwise wouldn't know about. But you get to see the language and you get to see who's willing to spend money to get in front of that audience. So as you figure out who that audience is for you, you can go get on those lists for the that would show up to the marketers and advertisers and see how that audience is already being spoken to. Because advertisers who spend money again and again and again to get in front of a certain market typically means they're seeing good success there. So those are ones to follow to see how they speak to that audience.
Now, this MVP product, going back to creating that first offer and then building upon that. When you first launch that first product, like you said, you put the sales page together before you even created it, right? You just had a few pieces of it together and you had a sales page, and then you market that and you see who buys. Mm-hmm. Now, I know we know what to do when you have a bunch of sales, right? You go ahead and you create the product. I know what to do when you have zero sales, right? You kind of scrap the idea and, you start again and try something else. But what happens if you only have like one sale or maybe a handful of sales? And do you still go ahead with it, or do you, what happens?
So I'm sure our listeners are familiar with the book Good to Great, right? If you haven't, it's a great read. One of the quotes I love from that we use all the time is that good is the enemy of great, right? We all can recognize great, right? When you got a knock out of the park winner, that's easy to identify. We can all identify a failure. We can tell when something was a complete flop. But that good is such a dangerous place to be, right? So if you get a few sales, it can be tempting to try and make good great. But sometimes we've got to say, hey, this wasn't a success. But the important part to recognize there is going in with a definition of success. And we use this concept of definition of success everywhere, from marketing campaigns to sales processes, to customer service, to like everywhere, right? If you define what success looks like ahead of time, you can know if you've hit it or not. Otherwise, you'll end up in one of two places. One, trying to call anything a success, and two, never being satisfied with the outcome because you want more, right? And when we talk about entrepreneurial freedom, an important component of that is recognizing when you define what success looks like for you, like life-wise, not just in your business, but like life-wise, you can build a business that supports that. Otherwise, you get into this never-ending chase of bigger, and bigger isn't always better. I had a friend in one of the mastermind groups that I was in who had built up a business to the point that the entire first floor of his office building was 75 setters, and the next floor was 75 closers.
Wow.
And they had a two-step sales process with like 150 people just involved in closing deals all day long, right? That's a pretty good size operation. And they were doing a ton of revenue. It was also a really expensive operation with a lot of stress and headaches and everything else. You think about managing a team that size. Well, he moved on from that to go down to like a 5-person company, which is very different. And wouldn't you know it, the smaller business had way more profitability and way less stress and was able to then be leveraged and built up yet again in a different way. So bigger is not always better. And being mindful of seeing the outward signs of, quote, success in others and their businesses, that might not be the business or the life that you want. You don't need to create the next decacorn to be successful or happy. And we all probably know people who are workaholics, and the price they pay for that is the relationships with family, with spouse, kids, community, things like that. And they end up in this sad place where maybe they see success in business, but for what? Right? So be mindful of what you're building and what you're building for, so you have that definition of success, and use that same definition of success, Todd, to your point, in a product launch or a new product. Figure out what that bar is. And maybe you're like, look, I'm looking to pitch my idea and get like 5 new clients at this price point to validate this. And you only get 2. So you then have a choice to make. Do you just take care of those clients and move on? Or do you refund them and say like, hey, like this didn't work out? Do you launch something else and offer those clients to roll in that, the fee they paid for product A into product B instead, or get it returned back? Like there's a number of ways to approach that. Certainly on projects we've been involved in where there was a product launch that didn't get the numbers we wanted, we were able to offer exactly that, of there being a different offering and asking if that buyer wanted to simply roll what they paid into something else instead. And more often than not, the relationship started. There's a value they're looking for. There's a result they want. And if you can help them get that result in a different way and maybe attract a broader audience, that's a big win. But even if you don't hit your definition of success, there are lessons to be learned there. Take that Kaizen approach of continuous never-ending improvement, and in every quote failure, there's a ton of lessons you can learn and apply. The trick to the resiliency and success is shortening that recovery period. So from the quote failure to trying again, shorten that and tighten it up as tightly as you can.
And I like that point about, defining, what success is, because very recently we had a client that launched his very first course for the first time. He did a live webinar for the very first time, launched it to, I think he had an email list of maybe a couple hundred or something like that. And so it was the very first time doing everything. And he emailed his list. He got like 25 registrants for his webinar. I think only 4 of them really attended. And then he got 1 sale on the live webinar. And then he posted about it. He's like, I'm pretty disappointed in these results. I only got 1 sale. Blah, blah. I was like, well, email your list and send them the replay. And he did that and he got another sale. And it's like, okay, so now you have 25% or 25 people who registered and 2 sales. If we look at the numbers, right, I know that the numbers are small, but the percentages are pretty darn good, right? That's 8% conversion rate overall. That's a positive. That's a win. To me, that's a win. And he was feeling down about this. I'm like, no. This is something that I would say let's start running paid ads to, and let's see what it does now, because those numbers are good.
Yeah. It's I love that you brought up the percentages. It's easy to get, fooled by big numbers, but not know the percentages. We had an offer we were running to affiliate lists in our earlier days, and still learning all this stuff. And we had one affiliate we were working with. They had an email list of 250,000. We were like, wow. Whoa! Like that, we knew our numbers for how our webinars converted, and of course we start doing that, that fancy math, and we're like, this is going to be incredible. And he runs the emails again. These emails we fine-tuned and tweaked that we know worked. And like, no joke, Todd, I think you had like 6 people show up in the webinar. And we're looking at this. We're like, how? Like, this is terrible. And then we had another partner that we're working with on an affiliate, on a webinar. And he had a list of like 600. And I think he had like 300 people show up to the webinar.
Wow.
It was fantastic. And so the lesson we learned from this is like, list quality. So we started asking a few additional questions when affiliates signed up. We would ask like, oh, well, like, who is this list? Like, are these members, like paid continuity members? Are these customers, meaning known buyers? Are these just opt-ins? Was this purchase list? Like, what's the list quality? And the second thing we asked is like, talk to us about past webinars. How many people typically show up at a webinar when you run one, right? How many people typically buy? And so suddenly we were able to start dialing in the quality and conversion numbers, not just ogling at the big list number, because down the funnel is really what matters most. And to your point about like, cleaning up on some of these quote failures, one of our very first webinars we ran back in the day, this was in the days of GoToWebinar, if you remember those guys.
Yeah.
It was new to us. It was our first time running an offer buy webinar. And we brought on a guy who we knew, like we'd seen him sell, we'd seen him do really well. And we were excited to have him to our pitch to our list. So this was like the week before Thanksgiving. And we start the webinar, he hops in, we kick it off. He goes into his whole presentation. He did a great job. We've seen it work before. And we finish up and like, it's crickets. And so, we finished the webinar and we're like, all right, let's go check. Let's see those numbers. Let's see how we're doing. And what we found was our support queue was full of folks responding to our email saying, hey, like we're on, it says waiting for hosts to start the webinar. And so we just did a whole 90-minute on mute. No one heard a single word. And we were like, there's a start webinar button. Oh my goodness. And we were devastated. So again, what do? Do you pack up and go home, or do you find a way forward? And we're looking at this, we're like, Thanksgiving is next week. Who's going to show up on like a Tuesday before the busiest travel days and go on a webinar? And we're like, well, what else are we going to do? Like, we already got stuff on the calendar. Like, let's try it. So we sent the mea culpa email, right? That, oops, our bad. We're goofs. Look, even though, keep in mind, these people saw the screen. They saw the whole slide deck. They saw the value build. They saw the price crash. They saw all of it. They just didn't hear a single word, right? It's like, there's no surprises here. They just missed any of the audio. So we're like, no one's going to show back up, but hey, we got to try. So we did. We got folks back on days before Thanksgiving to watch a webinar they'd seen and not heard. And it did fantastic. So yeah, you can do cleanup, even from a mistake, even from an oops. The follow-up emails, the replays, all those things are huge, right? There's an iterative process we do when we work on funnel optimization. And we look at like, what are the worst performing parts of the funnel? How do we improve that, right? And so, for example, if in your business, you have people like opt in and then sign up to get onto a call with you, like a discovery call, for example, or a sales call, you might have a low show rate. And we've seen this again. People are like, oh, like only 30% show up to the call they scheduled. Well, there's some low-hanging fruit stuff we can do there. Like, are you sending a text message? Are you getting an email confirmation, an email reminder, a calendar invite, right? Are you empowering that person to get onto the call with you? Or are you just hoping, set and forget, and they'll show up? And so simply adding some of those things in improves that conversion rate. And like the example you gave there a moment ago, Todd, of, sending the email replay out, giving folks a second chance to get onto a live replay, any of these things lets you take what might not quite yet meet your definition of success and get it across the line. But that only matters if you know what that definition of success is.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the point about booking calls and people not showing, because that was our very first experience trying to run a book a call funnel. Right. We had 14 people book, and not a single one showed up.
Oh,
but we were very new at the time.
Yeah.
And we just kind of assumed that, hey, if somebody books an appointment, they're going to show up. Like, you put it on your calendar, you've set it,
right?
Yeah, we didn't send out a single reminder, not a single one.
Yeah, so I'm of the belief, like, if you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you agree to show up somewhere, like, it goes on my calendar, and you say you'll do it, and you do it, and that's that. There's no question, there's no reminders needed. Like, I got it. I'm a professional, and then I've got to remember, not all of the world operates that way.
Yeah.
So like when I sign up for like a calendar thing and I get 7 reminders and the text messages, I'm always like, please, like, it's on my calendar. I'm going to be there. But that's not everyone. You're not your own customer. And when we recognize that and you do what you guys did, that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, now we send, like you said, we send out a ton of reminders, text,
Right.
text, email, you're showing up.
Yeah. And yet somehow folks don't show up, or they show up late or something else. And I don't get it, but not my own customer. It's all right.
Awesome. So if people want to learn more about you or what you do, where should they find you?
Yeah. So I'm over at bayareamastermind.com, BAYAREA mastermind.com. The case studies we have, the articles on some of the things that we were talking about on our call, all of that and more is all at bayareamastermind.com. And if you're curious, like what is a mastermind group or how do those work? We have the articles you need there on like how to create a mastermind group, how to run a hot seat, how to find a mastermind group near you, and all of that. And if you're curious, like what the Bay Area Mastermind is like, we have our test drive. So you can find all that stuff on our website and more, and find out what it's like to be in a mastermind and how that can help you, and how there's people just like you out there looking to connect, grow, and scale.
I love that. Those resources sound really, really helpful for folks, because a lot of people talk about masterminds. A lot of people are interested in them, but they don't have any sort of reference points or what would a really good mastermind, if you want to create one, what should that look like? All of that stuff. I think that's beautiful. So we appreciate that. Is there a specific freebie that you want to give away?
Yeah, so we have a number of workshops, like the funnel optimization I was just touching on.
Mm-hmm.
I have a whole workshop we ran out. The video's online. There's no opt-in there. That's the resources. My Google Sheet spreadsheet you can use and like calculate your own numbers. All that stuff is at bayareamastermind.com. We also have our Mastermind Master Reads. That's sort of like my short PDF version for you of like the foundational books all of our members have read or do read early on when they join the group. Our recommended books, which is a much more exhaustive list, is also on the site. The interviews I have with entrepreneurs who found entrepreneurial freedom. I love doing freedom interviews, and I profile those stories there, and so much more. So all those freebies and resources and everything is at bayareamastermind.com.
Perfect. Well, we'll have the links to that in the show notes and descriptions. We appreciate you, Jeremy. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.